Northeastern Jurisdictional Conference. We are meeting at this beautiful, I'm in a corner so you don't get to see it, but this wonderful and beautiful historic hotel, the Omni William Penn, here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. As we gather, all five, so the other four jurisdictions, U.S. jurisdictions in the United States, are also gathering. So if you followed any of the updates for General Conference and conversations about regionalization, just as a reminder, so outside of the United States, conferences that are a collection of annual conferences are called central conferences. Within the United States, the same entity are called jurisdictional conferences. There is not currently, although we did approve at General Conference and need to move forward with ratification, constitutional amendments to create a U.S. regional conference. But presently, the only way that those decisions are made, things like electing bishops and assigning bishops, happen at U.S. jurisdictional conferences. Because of that, our rules, our discipline says that all jurisdictional conferences have to meet at the same time. And so it is prescribed. So yesterday, so delegates generally arrived on Monday, and yesterday on Tuesday, we essentially had an open day that planners had to figure out what to do with. In most years, we would have spent yesterday the whole day interviewing endorsed candidates for the Episcopacy to run to be bishop. We did not expect there to be any elections, and so we did not have interviews, and so that was an open day. So I'm going to tell you what we did, but part of what we did that day has bearing on discussions about the Episcopacy, okay? And one of the things I want to say, so I am so grateful for those of you who watch these videos as we have conferences, General Conference, Annual Conference, Jurisdictional Conference, and often what I'm trying to do is to summarize and simplify as concisely as possible all the things that are happening. I want to say from the start that in terms of how the U.S. is handling the assignment and election of bishops this year, the history of those discussions, the complexity of the factors, the different groups and people in committee who are trying to have input on all of that, feels to me like the most complex issue that we've ever had. And so trying to figure out how to break that into pieces for you is a little overwhelming. So I'm going to try to summarize some of the pieces, but please know that part of the challenge is it's not even like there's different layers of an onion. It's just like, it's I don't know. It's like it's like dodgeball. It's kind of a little bit, it's like a mixture of layers of an onion and playing dodgeball and different things being thrown in. So if, as I'm trying to summarize this, you're like, but I have all these other questions, please drop those in comments. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I'll try to answer those. We have a lot of questions here. And the reality is some of the questions are just kind of, we're going to have to live into them, which I hate to do, but sometimes that's what we've got to do. So that's the intro. Yesterday, what we were scheduled to do was to spend time in spiritual disciplines, and we weren't sure what that meant. So what we ended up doing, it was a wonderful time. We opened with worship, and in that worship had a powerful, powerful reflection on the history of racism in the United Methodist Church, in particular in our jurisdiction. I encourage you to look at the Northeastern Jurisdictional website that has information about a charred cross that is the focal point for our time together. I know that they're live streaming. I haven't yet had a chance to get on the website to see if previous sessions are online, but I would really encourage you to check out the worship from Tuesday morning. It was very powerful, and I thought a very creative and informative way to talk about the history of racism rooted in this place as part of our Northeast jurisdiction, and also the history of the central jurisdiction. And we had a litany where we were invited to repent of our racism and to recommit to our baptismal covenant. Then in the morning, we spent time in meditation and reflection. And so in the morning and in the early afternoon, we also had time to gather as delegations. We shared key verses that are meaningful to us. We shared what are our prayers for our annual conference, our own annual conference. And then a really cool thing we got to do kind of at the end of our time of community spiritual disciplines was we took from the Korean practice of praying out loud. That kind of sounds like a cacophony, but we know that God hears. And so what those leading us had us do was we stood by annual conference. The delegates in the room stood by annual conference, and all of the other delegates prayed were invited to pray out loud. And so what you'd have, okay, Baltimore Washington Conference stand, and you just like you would be in a room where everybody's talking, right? Kind of talking over each other, but it was just beautiful. And the prayers, kind of the volume rose, and then everybody, and then the prayers finished and it settled, and we went to the next annual conference. And so that was really neat. I really appreciated that. In the morning, as we were really beginning, and again, keep in mind, we're not officially convened. Like, we don't convene till this morning. There's no bishops presiding. The bishops are in the room. There's nobody presiding. Also keep in mind, well, not keep in mind, you wouldn't have known this, that the Committee on Episcopacy continues to work. And so many of the times we've been together for worship or gathering, they haven't been in the room because they've been off doing their work. But some delegates stood and asked, and again, we're not convened, so they're, kind of just asking, that we ask the Committee on Episcopacy to present a presentation on scenarios and assignment of bishops and what we're hearing about how they expect to work through what General Conference voted we need to do in terms of keeping the U.S. cap on bishops at 32. The original plan to essentially move 3 bishops from kind of the 3 jurisdictions in kind of the middle of the country, 2 to the western, 1 to the northeast. Of course, all of that has changed. Everything keeps changing. We had a bishop from the South Central who's retiring, one in North Central who's going on disability. There's different opinions about whether that actually takes him out of the count. GCFA apparently thinks it doesn't. Everybody else is like, look, this is the best we can do. So the Southeast still needed to move a bishop, presumably to the Northeast, but the Book of Discipline says that we can't force anybody to go. So what do we do in the midst of all of that? So delegates had questions. And I think that there were some folks that really wanted that. There were some who, I got to say, I was like, look, we're not convened. I don't know. Is this going to be a good use of our time? But Bishop Easterling said, look, we'll do both. Bishop Easterling, who is our bishop in the Baltimore Washington Conference, leads our College of Bishops. So the Northeast jurisdiction, there's that gathering annual conferences we're gathering, the bishops are part of a College of Bishops. All together in the United Methodist Church, the bishops are the Council of Bishops, but in a jurisdiction or in a central conference, there's a College of Bishops. Bishop Easterling leads our College of Bishops. And so in the afternoon, towards the end of our session, before we would break for dinner, we had a great dinner cruise, the Committee on Episcopacy broke from their work and came back, and they offered 4 of their leaders, those including our own Ianther Mills from the Baltimore Washington Conference, shared kind of chronologically how we got to where we are. Again, essentially, as I mentioned, where the most recent update we had from the Interjurisdictional Committee on Episcopacy, that the expectation would be that the Western jurisdiction would elect 2, because the other jurisdictions don't have bishops that could be sent, and that a bishop would be shared between the Southeast jurisdiction and the Northeast jurisdiction to get us to 6. But there are a lot of questions about that. There is some frustration that bishops were unwilling to move in the context of, it's even though the Book of Discipline has always had a mechanism for bishops to serve in other jurisdictions, it's not something that's been commonly done. There's a lot of uncertainty about process because the Interjurisdictional Committee on Episcopacy has been in our Book of Discipline, but it's never really functioned, has never really had to do anything. And so at this General Conference, they were given a lot of responsibility to come with recommendations that General Conference did vote on. There's some people have used the term constitutional crisis. What do we do when we can't fully resolve what if you have to move bishops, but we're not allowed by the Book of Discipline to move them? How do we? So there's lots of questions. The reality is there's no perfect solution in this season. In the midst of that, there have been different folks calling for, do we go with the plan and we share this bishop from the Southeast jurisdiction that would serve a conference there and a conference here, so one of our bordering conferences. Most likely would be West Virginia. What does that do for figuring out how we use the remaining 5 bishops to cover the remaining 9 conferences? And so there's individual interests, there's annual conference interests, there's just general uncertainty. There are some folks that trust those groups and that trust the bishops, and there's some that just don't. And so some of the different forces are things that people can talk through, and some are just like, they're just like emotional in people's guts. And so how do you have conversations around all of these different factors? And so the Committee on Episcopacy, I think, did a really great job explaining it. Again, I'll double check, I'll drop the link if I can. Yesterday's session, it would be, so towards the end of the afternoon session, they really did an excellent presentation, and then we had questions and answers. Largely, Bishop Easterling facilitated that. She shared some on behalf of the College of Bishops, and we got to hear some of the questions that delegates have, some of the concerns. We weren't in session, so we weren't using parliamentary procedure. So there were folks got to talk longer than they will, and when we're in session, they got to ask multiple questions, things that they just won't be able to do. I felt in the end, and I've talked to other delegates, I felt like it really was very helpful that there were folks that had questions and concerns, and those were able to be addressed. There's some things that people didn't know, or people had wrong information. There are some things that people they know it, they just don't like it. And so part of the conversation is, okay, well, this might not be great, but like, what's the other solution? And so in the midst of all of those things, right, we've got GCFA telling us what they think about how that affects money. We've got, we have a strategic task force that's been working in the NEJ that had already been working to figure out what are the different ways that we can align Episcopal areas. And they used, for those of you in the Baltimore-Washington Conference, and others may use Mission Insight to try to say, can we align conferences that have similar makeups of populations? But that team has not worked through a scenario that we're currently facing where we're sharing a bishop with the Southeast jurisdiction and then trying to figure out other alignments. They had worked through, what if we have 6 bishops? What if we have 5 bishops? There's some delegates who say, look, we don't want to share. We don't want to have to share a bishop. Let's just go to 5 now. Let's just go to 5 now. There are others who say, no, there's all these different factors. We are in connection. We have a responsibility. We need to hold faith with other jurisdictions, with the work of the General Conference. This is for 4 years. It's just for 4 years. In the midst of this, they did share that the Committee on Episcopacy and our College of Bishops support this move, but that they will be asking the Judicial Council. So we should be receiving this in session today for a ruling on the constitutionality of all of the things, right? Of who has the authority to decide, to recommend, to direct, because there have continued to be changes in this work since General Conference, right? So some of these pieces, they were recommended, they're brought before the General Conference by the Interjurisdictional Committee on Episcopacy, but General Conference then voted on them. But again, in the intervening time, our Constitution prevents us from fully enacting what General Conference directed. And again, a primary way that is the case is because bishops can't be forced. So we're kind of stuck in this place that we have, and we heard yesterday we have no roadmap for. And so there is a sense among many delegates of, look, we want to be focused on mission and ministry. We don't, we understand that we've got to do the best we can. And there are others who, continue to have concerns. And so we'll see how that plays out. There's also some sense that what if we have some delegates and there might be some who push for elections, whether that is because of their own interest, or what they believe is best. There's questions about what would be the process to do that. It sounded yesterday like the bishops who presiding would be likely to rule that out of order because we as a jurisdictional conference don't get to vote on how many bishops we elect. In the past, we voted because we have often elected fewer than we were entitled to. And so there was a distinction that Bishop Easterling made yesterday between what has been our practice and what the Book of Discipline says. So ultimately today, we expect the Committee on Episcopacy to say, as the Book of Discipline says that they do and will, here are our 6 active bishops, and that will include our 5 continuing, because Bishop Scholl's retiring, our 5 continuing NEJ bishops, and the name of the bishop from the SEJ, the Southeast jurisdiction, that we will be sharing. With those 6 names, there are then no slots into which to elect. And so certainly holding the expectation and, again, holding faith with our colleagues everywhere else that there will be no elections will be an important step for us to then get past for our Committee on Episcopacy to then do that important work of then assigning where these bishops are going to serve. Because again, all of the work of the Strategic Task Force never anticipated this scenario. And so we're not starting from scratch, but the Committee on Episcopacy really has some important conversations. They've been having long meetings, hard meetings. We're very grateful for their work. So that's some of where we are with different levels of different opinions, different levels of understanding. A lot of complex things. Hopefully things are starting to settle out. We had a great dinner cruise yesterday. It really was very beautiful. Grateful to the organizers. I think it was a time for fun. Not all delegates, but the vast majority of delegates and our bishops. We were on a 3-hour cruise, but we got back where we were going. Had a wonderful time. And so hopefully that was a good opportunity for folks to fellowship as we head into work today. We have a busy day. Today, Wednesday and Thursday are our full days. And we're going to start at 8:30 with a memorial service, and we'll continue with breaks and meals. The last thing that's on the agenda is a celebration of Bishop Scholl for his retirement. That's scheduled for 7:40. And the kind of big announcement that folks are waiting for, where bishops are going to be serving, that's going to be Friday morning. So it's scheduled around 8:30, 8:45, and that will be made to the full gathered plenary. So in the meantime, thank you for praying for the delegates to the Northeast Jurisdictional Conference. We appreciate your prayers and your support, and we will see how our work unfolds today. Hopefully that wonderful spirit of collaboration and forward looking and leaning that we experienced at General Conference will really fill our time together.